like that? Like that?
That
Is that
is
good?
just
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
That is just fine.
Great. Great.
Well, welcome to the Bases Project, and this is I really love Canada. Hello, oh Canada. I spent
Oh,
some of the
Canada.
best. I spent some of the best time in my life in Canada, in Toronto. And do you
Mm.
still have a radio station in Vancouver called CFOX FM?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I knew a DJ there called MILAB-ABDUCTEE. She was one of the jocks, but it's a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
God Almighty.
I remember those days.
Well,
I do.
welcome. This is really great. You got me having a cup of tea here, and it's
Me too.
normally I have a sponsored logo on the thing, but this is just Las Vegas. So this is really, really good to see you, because what we're talking about here is developing things further in Canada. And you've got a good scene over there. You got some guy called Alfred Weber. I can
Yes, we
never
do.
pronounce his full name, and it's really bad.
Labramont. Labramont Weber.
Ladram, is that
He's
French?
French.
French.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
good. French. Le Canada. Yeah. I was in Ottawa once, and I lived in Toronto. More accurately said, Toronto. Is that Taraannna? Toronto?
Tirana.
It's
Well,
not.
I'm on the West Coast, and I always have been. I've been to Toronto a few times, and I've been to Ottawa and Montreal and Quebec City, but only as a tourist, only for short times.
So tell us all about why you're. I mean, you look wonderful. You look great. You're full of smiles, but it's not quite like that, is it?
Well, you have to keep smiling no matter what. I think that's the thing. I listen to David Icke all the time, and that's what David says. He says you just have to be in higher consciousness. They want you to be in lower consciousness. They want you to be in depression. They want you to be angry. And the more that you can overcome that, the better off you are. And, I try. I'm not always able to do it. Sometimes I get really angry.
Yeah, well, I have to say, so
But
do I. It's a pretty hard time at the moment,
yeah,
but yeah. So
yeah. But you have
where
to
does
try
your
to rise
story
above it, is
start?
what I'm saying. Well, I'm not originally from Vancouver. Of course, the phone would ring.
Yeah, well, my phone just rang, and that's not a coincidence. It's amazing that the phone should ring exactly when we both start.
I know. I was born in Uruguay, so that's where I hail from. My mother was Argentinian, and my father was Ecuadorian. He was a traveling musician, and his music brought him to Argentina, where he met my mom. And my mom was a seamstress, and there had been a really big earthquake in Quito, not Quito, but in Ambato, Ecuador. And my mom had volunteered to make the costumes for a big fundraiser. And my father had volunteered to play guitar, dressed in native dress, which wasn't his native dress, but native dress of the native people of Ecuador. And they met, they fell in love, and that's where I started. That was in 1950. 1951, I think it was. And I was born in 1953. I was born in Uruguay while they were honeymooning. And a war broke out between Uruguay and Argentina. And my mom was able to get back to Argentina, but my dad was not. So, because he was an Ecuadorian citizen. So, I spent the first 3 years of my life there. And they loved it. They had a wonderful time in Uruguay. And so that's originally where I'm from. Next thing that happened is that my parents continued to travel because he continued to be in his musical trio. And we went to Chile, we went to Colombia, and eventually we went back took a train and a boat through the Amazon, and we went back to his country, to Ecuador. So I spent the next few years there in Ecuador. And eventually we went to the States, which is where I did all my growing up in New Jersey and New York.
And you enjoyed New York?
I love New York.
You're a real New Yorker.
I love it. Yeah. I think it's in my blood somehow.
New York, so good they named it twice. Coming up with all the really corny stuff tonight. But what brought you to? Would you call yourself a TI?
I don't like the term at all. It's part of this higher thinking. I don't. I know that they do target, but I don't like the term at all, and I don't identify with it.
I mean, yeah, I agree.
Not that it doesn't happen.
It makes you into a victim. You are a target, so you must be a victim, and that's the first failure. You shouldn't be that to start with.
Right. I really, really don't believe in victimhood. I have a philosophy that everything that happens to us is for a higher reason. My abduction happened in Quito, Ecuador in 1967. I had gone back. My parents had wanted me to do some of my studying in Ecuador so that I wouldn't lose the language. Thank you. Now I'm a translator and an interpreter in Spanish and English. So that was a very big gift that they gave me. They sent me back to Ecuador in 1965 to do, the beginning of high school there. And that's when the first abduction that I have a real time loss memory of it. I'm sure there were other things and I have other memories before that. But the first abduction that I can really say I saw a ship, I was on a ship, it was in 1967 in Quito, Ecuador. And later I returned to the States. But
before you get that far, I mean, I remember the editions of Flying Saucer Review. There were a lot of UFO things going on in that part of the world. Do you know of any climate of ET kind of stuff, or what was the climate happening? Were you sort of one of many, or what?
Well, here it is, Miles. I was 14 years old. So, kids of 14 probably now have a lot more information than kids in 1967 did. Of 14, we were pretty innocent, I think. I had absolutely zero knowledge of UFOs or aliens or anything like that. I think that I had seen probably, the stuff that was on TV in the States or in the 60s. I can't remember any of the shows. I remember seeing Bewitched. I loved Bewitched. And then there were, help me out here, what were the shows that were on that were...
You had the genie, the lovely genie, yes, with Larry Hagman, is it?
That's right, yeah. And there were a few, I think, I'm not sure if that Martian show was on until later.
You mean Get Smart?
No, there was one.
The Invaders.
There was a Martian. Nope. I had never
seen
My Favorite Martian. Yeah, I don't remember if that was on in those years or not, or if it was on later in the 70s. I can't remember.
Well, I think it was 60s, I think.
My knowledge of stuff was very limited, if at all, and I think that if I had seen anything like that, it would have been under the filter of a funny story, a science fiction story. I didn't think that my favorite program ever was the Jetsons. So I did really love the Jetsons. But there's nothing like abductions in the Jetsons. It's a futuristic society where we have flying cars and all these lovely things, So really, in 1967, I had never heard of abductions. I had no knowledge of such a thing when it happened to me.
Have you heard of Betty and Barney Hill?
No, absolutely not. No.
I can't remember the date of that. I think you could be dealing with something very early here. in the subject. What did
Well,
you
thank
see?
you.
What was your
Seth.
abductions? What do you remember?
My friend and I had a friend named Doris, and she was the daughter of an army general that was stationed in Quito, Ecuador. And we were in a neighborhood called El Baton, which was primarily a U.S. military neighborhood. Not exactly a base. Well, I remember when I contacted you first, I was a little hesitant because my abduction didn't happen on a base per se. But it was a military neighborhood. All the U.S. people lived there in a certain part of that neighborhood. And I had met Doris's brothers in my school, Colegio Americano, and she went to a Baptist school, so I hadn't met her, but I had met her brothers, and we became very, very good friends. They were in some of my classes, and I think we did science together in the school where I was at. Half the day was done in Spanish, and half the day was done in English.
Now, we have to
Yeah,
just be clear here. I'm getting phone calls at exactly the same time you're getting phone
this is
calls. I
crazy.
mean, so, well, let's
Crazy.
just ignore them.
I'm going to lower my thing so it's silent. Um, so her brothers introduced me to Doris, and Doris and I became real big pals. She invited me over for a weekend. It was a long weekend, and it was in March, I think. I think it was March. It was just before spring break, or maybe it was spring break at school. And so I was to be at their place for the weekend. Now, Doris and I were both smokers. I was 14, she was 15. And she had a very regimental kind of lifestyle, being an army brat, and they had traveled to India and many other places. So her curfew was 10 o'clock. We went out at 9:40 p.m. on the first night that I was to stay over and to have our cigarette around the corner. We walked a block and a half, and we saw a light in the sky that at first we thought it was Venus or a big planet. Then it got bigger and bigger, and we thought it was the moon. I've been thinking about this, and I have two memories of it. So I need to do another hypnotic session to divide them up. But one of my memories is seeing the UFO that looked like a green and blue fried egg. The top was green, and the bottom was a beautiful turquoise blue. And I remember seeing that. Now, the next image that I remember, and it was coming closer and closer to us. The next image that I remember is a bright white light that we ran away from. And as we were running, Doris said, "Oh, it's the aliens. They want virgins that are under 15 years old." And she was laughing at me because I was 14. So she said, "They're not going to take me. They're going to take you." And we're running back to her house and laughing. We thought this was a big joke. And we got back to her house, and it was 1:20 in the morning. And all hell broke loose. All her family was lined up at the door, pale, scared. They grabbed her by the hair. The father grabbed her by the hair. I think he was going to beat her up. The mother stopped him. They started yelling at us and shaking her and telling her that they'd been out for 3 hours looking for us all over the neighborhood, and they were about to call the police. Now, they thought we'd been out to a disco partying and drinking. We thought we'd been out for 10 minutes smoking a cigarette. And that's as much as that time thing happened. So obviously,
How did you eventually remember this? How did what happened with the family?
well, the family was really angry. All of them were angry, and they said that we were lying, that we had not been out smoking a cigarette because they had been combing the neighborhood. She had 3 big brothers and the father, and they'd been combing the neighborhood, and they couldn't find us. We went up the street to her house, half a block, and another block over. So we would have been very, very easy to find if we hadn't been abducted. but we were abducted. So they couldn't find us. We just weren't there. But we didn't know that. And we were saying, pleading, justifying ourselves that no, all we did was go out and smoke a cigarette. We weren't supposed to smoke a cigarette, but at that point it was better to say that we were out smoking a cigarette than to think that we'd been out to a club drinking and doing whatever. Anyway, they promptly phoned a taxi and sent me home. I didn't get a chance to spend with her any more time. They told my uncle that we'd been out drinking and carousing. I was grounded for life. I was hit by my uncle. I was beaten up. Punished, grounded, and she and I were forbidden to ever see each other again. So, move forward about a week and a half. Her brothers, who were in my school, told me that Doris wanted to see me, and there was a going away party. They had been re-stationed somewhere else. They didn't tell me where, but they had been removed from Ecuador, and they were going to leave in a week. So the whole time period between the abduction and the time when they left the country was at the most 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks tops. So he'd been reassigned right away. And
what did he do? What was his task?
I have zero memories, Miles. I have zero memories of whatever he did.
I mean, was he any idea of rank or anything at all, or what he,
my memory's been wiped many, many times. You could call that TI if you want. You could call it MILAB if you want. I know that I have periodic memory wipes to the point where the only things I remember are my children's names and my own name, and everything else is gone. And I have to work really, really hard at bringing memories back. But of course, a lot of things are just gone. This is one of the things. I posted some stuff in WordPress.com. And this is the subject that I chose to talk about, was the fact that the memory wipes have basically made me very different from other human beings, because I don't have memories, therefore I don't have history with things. And that was one of the complaints that my mother had with me, is that I didn't remember the good things. I didn't remember, she would get very angry and she would say, don't you remember when we went to this place and, and that place and that amusement park? And I had zero memory of any of it. And it was really sad. It's been a sad thing in my family that I don't have memories. I mean, obviously my parents tried really hard to give us good memories, but they've been wiped. So that's been, as far as an abductee goes, that's been one of the drawbacks of being an abductee, I would say, is that I imagine that it's the military that doesn't want me to tell. Now, I had a very interesting conversation just recently with Grant Cameron, and Grant put it so well to me, and he kind of solved the mystery for me that I've had for 50 years. And he said, well, don't you think that they would do a memory wipe? You were with the daughter of a general when you got abducted. You were. So obviously they don't want this to come out. I had never thought of it, Miles.
Well, as a reference, I'm hoping this is being recorded still, because one of my recorders has just crashed, but hopefully this is still being recorded on my backup. So let's continue.
Okay, well, what I said, I'll just repeat, just in case, is that recently I met Grant Cameron. I knew of Grant through different things, webinars that he does on the internet. But I met him recently, last week, in fact, about my abduction, and he put clarification on something that I just couldn't figure out. I feel like a fairly normal person. I'm not, one of these messianic type of contactees or anything. I don't think I have the answer to the world or anything like that. So I couldn't figure out what these memory wipes were all about. And he said to me, don't you think that the U.S. Army would want to wipe your memories since you were abducted with the daughter of a general? Boing. Aha moment. Eureka. Of course they would. Of course. Whether anything happened in that abduction that's valuable for Earthlings, or whether that abduction was, in fact, a military abduction, doesn't really matter. What really matters is that his daughter was with me. And I'm sure that she's had a lot of wipes herself. Well, when I met with Doris, clandestine meeting through the bushes at a party that she was at, it was a going away party for her family. And the brothers told me where it was going to be, and I arrived and we talked to each other. She said that her father had told her never, ever, ever to mention anything about it. So I think that she did tell him about the abduction. And he told her that if we ever told anyone what had happened to us, that we would immediately be put into a mental hospital and throw away the key, basically. She scared me. She was very, very scared. And I didn't really talk about it. I put it away in my memory at that time when I was 14 until I was 17 years old. By then I was in Canada and I started to seek out UFO groups. And the first time that I ever told my story was to a man named David Livingston, who was running UFO groups in Vancouver. I have never found anything online about David Livingston. I don't think it was a real name. But I ended up joining his group and being in his group for the next 13 months. It was a
Can you sort of give some background to that UFO group, sort of who they were and what sort of things they did?
What he got people to come into the group through the UFO phenomena thing. But actually, as I found out later, when I left the group, he was a black magician who put a very, very dark spells and bindings on me, which lasted for a long time, and I still fight with them. I still fight with the dark side all the time. And I think that David was quite responsible for it. He broke up my marriage.
Can you go into that a lot more? Because this seems very important.
It was very important to me. I had met my husband. I won't say his last name to protect his identity, but his name was Bob. And I had met him in New York. I lived in a commune in New York at the time. I lived at Earth People's Park commune in New York City.
Now, this is important. Could you give me details on that?
I think we might have to have a couple of different.
Okay.
I was a member of Earth People's Park chapter, New York chapter, in New York City. It was a commune, and we had a big school bus, and we visited many, many farms. We did a lot of things together in New York, and the people that were in the people that were in this co-op, actually, it's very interesting. There was a fellow named Harry Friesen, and there was a fellow named Paul Livingston. Not Livingston. I can't remember his last name right now. And they were two people that were involved in early cryogenics research, and they were the leaders of the group. They were
this is very, very important. I've got lights flickering here and all sorts of things going on, and computers going mad. Okay, continue.
And he was one of these mad scientists. When he went to conferences, we had to help him put on his socks because he didn't wear socks or ties, or he didn't know when he was clean or dirty. He was just one of these genius types. And Paul and Harry were the leaders of this New York chapter of Earth People's Park. Earth People's Park started in California. The people chained themselves around a park that was coined Earth People's Park. They wanted to tear down a community park, and everybody chained themselves.
Where in California?
I don't remember because I wasn't there. I think it was in San Francisco. And then it became a commune, and then there were other chapters that happened in other places, and I was in the New York chapter. I was just 16 when I joined up with them. And I don't know, I don't know too much about the actual organization because I was in the New York chapter. But they knew all the big names. I met Carly Simon. We went up to different people's farms. They knew the hog farm people. They were very connected, much older than me. And Paul Siegel was a cryogenics expert. And that's all I know. And I remember dressing him to go to conferences and things like that. So that was my little life in New York when I was 17. And I met my husband, which I'm sure was an alien love bite now, or else he was a spy handler type person. But I met him in New York. I lived in a room that had a top and a bottom bunk. I was sleeping on the bottom, and I woke up one morning and he was sleeping on the top. He said all his ID and money and everything had been stolen. He was on his way to Japan. So his ticket to Japan was stolen. He was going to live in an ashram in Japan. Very spiritual man, very wonderful, wonderful man. Anyway, he ended up being my boyfriend and eventually asked me to marry him about a year later, and that is how I ended up in Canada. He was a Canadian boy. And he was 4 years older than me. So he was 21 when I was 17. And we came to Canada. He got me to Canada, and we joined this UFO group, which was called the ANO Foundation. That was the outer name. The inner name was the Order of Melchizedek. So that's
pretty heavy duty stuff. I mean, that's pretty advanced.
That was the very, very, very beginning of my stay in Canada. I didn't know anyone other than my husband, and then Livingston and all his people. The group was a typical 70s cult with black magic behind the veil. Very light and, all about healing and getting kids off the street and getting kids off drugs and all this on the outer part. That was the ANO Foundation. And on the inner part, I think very dark black magic was practiced by the group and the higher people that were in the group.
Exactly what makes you think it was much worse than that? What can you remember about that makes you feel that?
There is corroboration with what I have to say, because there was my best friend, her name was Petra, and I will not give her last name. My best friend in the group had asked them at one point to see their financials. And she was older, by 5 years older than me. She was 22 or 23. And she worked in the art gallery in Vancouver, and she was a very smart girl. And she had given a lot of money to this group, and she wanted to see where the money was going. And she had seen an accountant. She was trying to organize her RRSPs and all that stuff, even at a very young age. She's done very well for herself, actually, in life, because she's smart with money. And her accountant asked her to ask them for their accounting. Well, it took 3 months, and they kept saying, no, it's not ready, it's not ready, it's not ready. The books are open to everyone, but they're not ready. In the end, she left the group, and she did an expose. She did an expose on CBC, and this was in 1971. And she did an expose with Barbara Frum, from Toronto, from one of the radio stations in Toronto, and I did it with her. And we were filmed, and the people were filmed. We filmed them in their huge Shaughnessy mansion, which they were basically, what they were doing is taking people. Some of them were off the street, and some of them had jobs. Like I worked, and my husband worked. My husband Bob, we both worked, and we lived in an apartment, and we had beautiful things. And I remember we had a milk van, an antique milk van, and that's how we got around. And they got everyone to donate everything to them and to go on welfare. And what they would do is collect all the welfare checks, and then they put people into houses. They put women into women's houses and men into men's houses. So that's how they broke up my marriage with Bob, because we weren't, apparently we weren't the right signs to be together. He was an Aries and I'm a Gemini, and their groupings were Aries Taurus, and a Gemini Taurus and Aries Pisces. So they said that his wife should be a Pisces and my husband should be a Taurus. So that was how they broke up this marriage. They broke up many, many marriages while I was there for a year. And my friend Petra left, and she did this expose, and about a month later, I went to visit her, which was not allowed. And she told me that, she had been accosted in the street, that the people were chanting around her house, that they had broken into her house, and she suggested that I leave too. So I left, and she began the process of deprogramming me. And we worked together on this, and it was very, very hard to deprogram from the mind control that this was.
How did she know how to do it? What got her?
Well, she had been doing it, and she had help, because when she came out of it, I guess it was probably 2-3 months after she left. She was my best friend there, and I really missed her, so I went to visit her, even though it was prohibited. But she had been having some help. I don't know with whom, and so she helped me to deprogram. And there was eventually we went to live in the country, away from everything, with no TVs, no radios, no anything. And we had to hide from these people. We left because we had to hide. They were doing much the same thing that Scientology does to people who leave. They target them, they follow them, they torment them in different ways. And they were doing that to my friend, and I was staying with her, so we ended up leaving her apartment and moving to the country, to a secret place. A place that had no running water, no electricity, really, really in the bush. And that was how we managed to get away from these people once they were after us. That was the Order of Melchizedek, which has been disbanded. The man has been thrown out of Canada. He was American. The city of Creston, BC, disinvited him to Creston, BC, where his original order was. And unfortunately, there are still people who have taken over the order, but under a different name, and I don't know what that is.
So we're talking 2017. It's still in operation.
I don't know. Drumvello Melchizedek was in the order when I was in the order. And he had a short stay in the order because he was American as well. I think that he was an art student and came up here for a summer. And he got his original trainings from David Livingstone. So this can be corroborated as well. However, Drumvello got a lot of good from it. And obviously he's become a famous person and he's helped a lot of people. When I left the group, I went back. I used to run. I'm an artist and an artisan, and I ran the Arts and Crafts Center. I was young, but I was pretty talented with arts and crafts since I was little. My mom had taught me a lot of different things, and I went back to get some of my tools. And when I went back, I found David Livingston painting the space black. He had painted it black. I found the landlord, and the landlord was screaming and upset because he had painted everything black. And then there were black magic symbols all over the walls. And this is how they left the craft center, the place where the Order of Melchizedek and the A&O Foundation used to meet. So they painted the entire thing black, and they painted black magic symbols all over the walls. And I found him there, and it was not a very good meeting. Later, they had a tribunal. When I asked to have my things back, they had taken all my writings, all of my automatic writing. I had, it's kind of stupid to say so, but okay, I will anyway. I was doing meditations where I was being taken to different temples, possibly Atlantean, possibly on other planets, I don't know. And when I came back from them, I did automatic writing. It looked a lot like Arabic. But it was definitely a different language. And they kept all of that stuff. They kept all my songs. They kept all my writings. And they kept my guitar. So when I went back, when I asked for those things back, they had a tribunal. David and Winifred, his wife, were sitting on thrones that they had built. And their cronies, the higher-ups in the order, were there around them. There was a council of 9, I think. And I was way down. They had built the platform and put the thrones there. And they basically cursed me for 21 years. They cursed me with ignorance and confusion. And they said that I wouldn't find my way, which was pretty much true. Pretty much worked out to be true. So anyway, I continued the process of deprogramming from that group. And hopefully, I never meant to talk about this with you today, because I kind of forget about it now, But there were a lot of people that were really hurt by this group, much more than me. There were people whose children were stolen from them and taken through the courts, and I don't know what's happened to those children. So hopefully my testimony will help those people come forward, and we might be able to find those children.
What sort of age would they be now?
Well, it was 1971, so here we are, 2017. Those children would be very much grown up, probably parents or even grandparents at this point. But, it's the truth, and the truth should come out about this group. And I wish that Drumvello would listen to what this man, Livingston, did here in Canada. He did a lot of damage to a lot of people through that group.
What about the official bodies? I mean, you said they got thrown out and things like that. I mean, what's the official? Is there official documents people can look up or anything like this?
The only one that I know of for sure, where he was, I don't know if he was incarcerated, but he was definitely accused of fraud and other things, was Creston, BC. And I know that the city of Creston threw him out, and he was never welcome again. After we did the CBC expose, his religious license was taken away. So the Order of Melchizedek A&O Foundation was disbanded. It was no longer allowed to collect religious. It was no longer allowed to not pay taxes, and their religious license was taken away. That was through the work that Petra and I did early on in 1971. So, we were obviously running for our lives because that was a lot of money that was involved. They all the people that they had on welfare, what these people did, young people and old, and I know some old people gave away their houses, and typical 70s cult where they took everything from you and told you that you should have nothing in order to be enlightened, but they took everything. We gave away our van, we gave away everything we owned, basically. Bob's parents wouldn't allow us to give our furniture, which was antiques that they had given us. Thank God for that, and they took them back before we gave away everything. But then he did get us to go on welfare, and what the people did was to go out canvassing every day for the A&O Foundation. And we brought cans and cans and cans with hundreds of dollars each, for the foundation, to supposedly get kids off drugs. And so there was a lot of money that was all of a sudden cut off from them through the work that Petra did. And she did a lot of interviews. I will tell you privately, not online like this, what her last name was so that you can corroborate the information I'm giving you. But my last name was McGilvery at the time. I was married to Robert. So you can look that up. And so we did that, and then we went into hiding for 2 years.
What made you come out of hiding? What made it safe for you to come out of hiding? Because, this is a little bit personal from my point of view, because I was in the Scientology people in Toronto. I had a brief spell there.
Yeah. Well, these people
I spent a year there.
They were very similar to the
Not in Scientology, just a year in Toronto. I really enjoyed it as a student.
What made us feel that we were safe is that we had been hiding in a place that was really off the grid. I mean, no electricity, no telephone, no running water even. We had a pipe that went from the river right into our house to have cold showers. And
but what about food? How did you get money and food? And you must have had to go into society somehow.
Like I said, I was a pretty good. My friend was really smart, and she had been working for a very long time in the art gallery here, Vancouver Art Gallery, and so she had unemployment coming to her, so she was able to do that. And how I made my money is I made clothing, and I sold them in a store in Vancouver. So I made hippie clothing, robes and different things. And so that's how we survived. Plus, it didn't cost very much to live in the 70s, and we borrowed the cabin. Someone lent us a boat, so we were able to get in and out of the boat. It didn't require gas or anything. A very sweet lady who's passed on now, who lived around the lake where we lived, lent me a treadle sewing machine, and that's what I did my sewing on because I had no electricity. So at a certain point, we just felt safe, and my parents wanted to see me, so they sent us tickets to go back to Ecuador. So when I was 19, I went back to Ecuador to visit with my friend.
And as such, you've sort of almost lived happily ever after. Now, the thing is, I think you've got an appointment coming up. Are you okay for that?
I'm okay right now, yeah.
Okay.
I'm okay for another hour.
Oh, great. Well, let's continue. This is really fascinating. I mean, it's obviously something really important here.
It's a funny thing, Miles. It's the last thing on earth I was planning on telling you about, but here it is, and it is important. I think it is really important. And it's a part that I forget about, with all the other things, the nuts and bolts of the other stuff.
Well, it's a great story, so continue.
Black magic part, But, the actual abduction that happened when I was 14, of course, David never was able to help me with any of that. I think that he used the UFO agenda or the UFO banner to get people in, certain kinds of people. He might have even been an agent, right? To see who was interested in UFOs at that time, to see who were contactees and who were, abductees and things like this. I know that everyone who was in the order when I was in it had seen UFOs. And one of the things that Livingston claimed is that he could call them at will. And there was a place that he had on Knight and 22nd here, Knight and Kingsway area here in Vancouver. The building actually still exists. And we used to do our meetings there. And we would go to the back porch. And he would call the UFOs and we would see fleets of them. And that was true. But he was a pretty good fakir.
I mean, this is what we call in today's language a CE6 or CE5. But I mean, we have CSETI-Greer doing something like this, and he's asking people to call anything in. It seems to be very similar. Any creature into your body.
I've never. I do follow him, but I've never heard of that. Hang on for just a second. And so what does CE5 for?
I could be getting it wrong. A CE5 is a controlled bringing in of, again, it could be CE5 or CE6. The point is that you can actually bring in the craft. You mentally, you bring them in. And this is popularized recently in this current era, since the year 2000, CSETI-Greer has been doing his CSETI stuff, communication with extraterrestrial intelligence,
we were
using
doing that
searchlights and all that,
We were doing that with David Livingston in 1970 and 1971. We were doing that with him. We would meditate and look out the back door and the fleets would come. Old hat to us because I was seeing fleets all the time. My husband and I did a camping trip up in Vernon, BC. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to go there, but it's a quarry. And we had a really interesting experience at the quarry where we were seeing a craft, and we were being acclimatized, I guess you could say, to being reptilian. And so we were told to get naked and to get on the rocks, and take in the heat and everything. And so whatever David was doing, it was reptilian. Okay, I can give you this for a fact. Because when I went to the quarry, we were doing reptilian style things. The group that I went with and we were doing laying in the sun, warming up our blood and things that were very, very reptilian on the rocks. So that is not what my own UFO experience is. My UFO experience is with beings that I consider to be from Mars, long ago, Mars. Face brilliant, light like the sun. You can't see their face, kind of like you look right now to me.
Yeah, I can see on your camera. I have to do
the sun
something with
is
this
shining
camera.
on your face.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the aliens look like. Maybe it was you. No, anyway, I couldn't see their faces because there was so much brightness, and long white hair, and very long fingers, but human-like fingers. Is the beings that spoke to me in my abduction. And, they showed me the screen. They showed me, things that could come to Earth. They showed me how it was that Mars lost their atmosphere and people were no longer...
How did all that happen?
What I was shown, and
this is amazing. Tell us everything.
You have to understand that I was 14 years old. So my knowledge of science was a 14-year-old's knowledge of science. Also, we didn't have flat screen TVs, and then if anybody had rabbit ears on a big honkin' TV, they were lucky, right? If anyone had color TV. They were kind of rich. So
Sorry,
when
are
I
you talking Rabbit Ears is a TV aerial in America, wasn't it?
Well, rabbit ears were the antennas that you had to put
Yeah,
on top of your TV, and then you're moving the rabbit ears to catch the
yeah,
signal.
yeah.
And the TVs were really deep. They had tubes in them, and most TVs that everybody had were black and white. So very, very different from the experience that I had on the UFO, where it was flat screen TV, huge in front of me, and the being that I was with was moving the images, moving them along with his hand. I was sitting next to him, and he was reaching out with his long arm and fingers and moving the images like that, like we move an iPad now, right?
Yeah.
It's exactly the same.
This is 30 years
technology.
ahead, yeah.
This is 40,
40 years ahead.
40, right?
Now, what were the images? Describe the scene.
1967.
Keep going.
Okay, 50 years. It was 1967, so that's 40 years, and we're 17. It's 50 years now. And that was the first time that I ever saw a flat screen TV that you could move the way that we move iPads now. The other thing that I remember from the abduction experience is that I was put into a chamber that now I know is an MRI chamber. And before we were able to enter the ship, and I can't say what happened to Doris because my experience became my own experience and I didn't see her after we...
Did you see the outside of the ship? Did you see an external view of
Yes, we
this?
saw the outside of the ship. We saw the outside of the ship as it was coming in, and it had a beautiful sort of yellowy green top and turquoise, like the turquoise that's on your wall right behind you, on the outside. And the lights were spinning like a slowly spinning top when it's about to slow down. So the green and the turquoise and the yellow were kind of, spinning, slowing down like a top slows down. So we must have seen it as it was slowing down to come and get us. That's what we must have been seeing. It was beautiful, but we got scared. And by the time we ran away, what we saw is a bright white light. So that at first we had thought was the moon, but then it was coming closer and closer, and then we ran away. But in my regression, that one of the regressions that I've had, there was an MRI chamber that the beings, I don't like to call them aliens, and I don't like to call them, I have never seen one of those gray things that people talk about. I've never seen them. I've only seen tall whites. And what the beings told me was that they needed to disinfect my clothing and myself before I was allowed to enter the ship. So I guess we entered to a chamber that was cut off from the rest of the ship, entered into an MRI thing that killed whatever bacteria, and then we were allowed to enter with our clothes on. I was never, I was never probed or any of the things that other kinds of abductions have been to other people. My experience wasn't like that. My experience was fully dressed in the clothes that I had come in, but disinfected. I think they might have taken my shoes off. I remember seeing my feet. So shoes were not allowed in, but the rest of my clothes were on when he was showing me all these different things. And what I have to premise what I saw because I'm giving it to you in the filter of a young person who hasn't had a lot of science training. I was 14. So
that's dead. That's
probably
fine.
in grade 9, grade 8, grade 9, grade 8, I think. And so I didn't understand a lot of what he was showing me, but what they did show me was methane gas coming out of the ground of Mars. There were, you had to kind of jump away from explosions. when things were really bad. The methane gas was
I think
exploding.
just when you're talking about the methane gas, you're getting a bit low on the frame again. If you get slightly.
Oh, okay. Um, there were people.
Sorry, not your sound. Sorry, it's just your head. You've got those beautiful pictures behind you, but you're sort of sinking at the bottom of the picture.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that better?
That's great. Yeah.
Okay. So I can't recall anything different about the people that I saw on Mars looking any different from us. The being that I saw was different from us. He was taller, I would say 7 or 8 feet tall, with the face shining like light, and then the longer fingers, the being that was sitting next to me. It looked very, very ancient. And actually, what I like to correlate him to is when they talk about Noah, when Noah was born and he had the face like the sun and he had the white hair. So I think possibly there's a connection there with Noah, with Noah's people, whoever they were. When Noah was born, the husband was like, where does he come from? He's got white hair, But so what I'm saying is that these people that I saw were like that, like the description in the Bible of when Noah was born, and he had a face like the sun and the white hair. So that's what they were like. That's what he was like. I only remember one person. But the pictures that he showed me he showed me the time when I would have been about 12 years old, I suppose, around that age, preteen, when all of this was happening in Mars and all the children were taken off Mars and we were put into ships. And as we were boarding, there were explosions happening from the ground, fires that were exploding as if methane gas, now I equate it to methane gas because we've seen all the, what can happen in the dump sites and stuff like that. So I'm saying methane gas because now I have better knowledge of what it might have been. I had no idea when I was 14 what he was showing me. But there was fire coming out of the ground and exploding. And there were people running around all over the place and children being put into ships. Above, there were, I don't know if they were weapons. I tend to doubt it. I think that they were meteors or some kind of comet. There was kind of stuff, fire also coming down from the sky. But there was also these explosions that were happening from the ground up. And about 7 to 12 children were being put on ships. And he showed me that I was one of those children, and that's how I ended up on Earth many, many, many millennia ago or whenever it was. And I saw the trip, and I saw where we landed, and where we landed was in a cave. What was happening on Earth at the time, and the only thing that I could think of is that it was the beginning of the deluge. It was raining. It was starting to rain, and it was very, very cold. And us children from Mars, we were huddled. We were put into these caves way high up, and we were huddled, and we didn't have adult supervision. They were just getting the kids off Mars. And that's where my memory of that particular thing ends. So I can't tell you the exact timeline, but it was raining on Earth and it was fire on Mars.
Looks like potentially there was some kind of comet, maybe.
Possibly.
The main bulk of it was hitting Mars, and whatever else was falling on Earth, water, particles.
Yeah, and things were happening on Earth, but I think that we were put into the caves, and I've seen some pictures of caves in the Mediterranean that look so similar to my memory. That I wouldn't be surprised if they were, if that's where we went.
I mean, can you identify where that might be? I mean, if you had a better memory, I mean, was it before
Well,
the Mediterranean was flooded?
I am part of the Basque people. My mother's side, she's fully Basque. And I know that there are mythologies about the Basque people, that they were people who came from space. And I know that there were caves there. I want to go to Basque country and see for myself if I feel anything. Because, my intellect tells me that those were the caves there in Basque country in the Pyrenees. But when I've looked at pictures of, I think it's more like Turkey. There's a place high up. There's a mountain high up that has caves, and I can't think of the name right now. And that cave looked completely familiar to me when I happened upon it. I was doing some research about something else, and I went, boing, oh my God, that's, ooh, I know that place. So it could be that the children were dropped off into many different caves, but I remember that there was absolute confusion among the children, and we did not have adults. The pilot left, just dumped us and left. We had no supervision among ourselves. We had nothing. We were just taken off planet to be safe. And that's my memory. Childish, I know. I wish I had the secret of the world, but I don't. I wish I had scientific formulas, but I don't. But I have those memories of children just being dumped. Maybe we mixed with the Earthling population. Maybe we didn't.
Did you see any of the Earth population at the time?
No, absolutely nothing. No, the only memory that I have, but I've only done a little bit of regression work. I haven't ever had the money to continue, But
who's done this regression? I mean, are you sure it's not any? Some argue that it's an implanted memory when you do regression. I mean, how do you know it's yours,
I know.
Your memory?
Well, I've just written to Mary Rodwell and Barbara Lamb to ask them if they were ever in Vancouver and did a regression with the human potential people here. I was a member of the human potential group. It was basically a psychic development company where we learned to read energies. We did polarity training and healing stuff, right? And it was called the Vancouver Center for Human Potential, and that was in 1987. And I've just written to Barbara Lamb and asked her if she was the one, because I don't know who it was, and it was a blonde lady. And as I said, I get I get memory wipes, so I can't remember the woman's name who did my regression. But she was going to write a book, and I don't know if it was her or not. I've just written to her. I've asked her if she could please tell me if she was ever in Vancouver doing any regressions. Does she remember? But it was a very interesting regression that happened, and I have to say that it could not be a memory implant, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I have to go use the washroom. I'm sorry. I have to take a little break. Where were we? We were at Barbara Lamb.
Yeah.
That's the last thing that we were talking about. Okay. I had an abduction here at the Center for Human Potential. A lady wanted to come, and she had heard that there was an abductee that was part of the group. That was me. I was learning polarity training and other healing modalities at the time. And she came in and she said, "Oh, I heard you were an abductee. I'm writing a book. Would you like to do an interview?" And I said, "Sure." So she laid me down on a table And she said, I'm going to put a crystal on your solar plexus so that it will help us, you know, with the regression. Well, the minute she put the Peruvian crystal on my, it had it had what's that? The fool's gold, pyrite.
Yeah.
It had pyrite and crystal, and uh, the regular crystal,
Quartz.
quartz. Yeah, it had pyrite on the bottom, crusty, and then little quartz that were coming out of it. She put it on my stomach, and I felt the feeling of an elevator going, just going up. She didn't even say 1, 2, 3. She didn't even talk. So, implanted memory? I don't think so, unless they know how to implant memories into crystals. Because this lady, whoever interviewed me, did nothing, said nothing to me. And I went straight into the experience. And that was when I first remembered that I'd gone through an MRI machine to get disinfected, and that they had taken my shoes off. So that when I went into the craft, I went in without shoes. And I still had all my clothes on, and I remembered exactly what clothes I had on and everything. And then I had a very, very intense regression with her where she barely said a word. It was just me remembering. You know, so nice picture. In that regression, I'm a little bit afraid to say it. I don't really want to say it. I'm not going to say it. But in that regression, they had told me that I had been born with this knowledge, and that I had volunteered this lifetime to open things up and to be an assistant for the new energies coming to the planet. And when they did my abduction at age 14, they wanted confirmation that I was still in to this volunteer program. And that's why they abducted, that's why they took me. It was to get confirmation that I was still in. It wasn't really to do anything to me, but I was still confirmed. I remember when I was there, I remember that, yes, I had come as a volunteer and I was still in, and it was all good. And he showed me the pictures of Mars. Now, one of the things that they told me in this in this session, I won't call it abduction, I'll just call it session, is that Earth is going much the same way that Mars is going. And they told me that I, in particular, should be very careful about working with water on this planet, because water is what's going to go.
What do you mean, go?
It's, well, Mars lost all their atmosphere because there was fire above and fire below. But they also lost all their water. And what I was told in that session with the being, the tall white being, is that Earth, that we are really screwing with our water, and that our water is one of the number one issues that we need to take care of if we don't want to lose our atmosphere like Mars did. So they weren't talking about war, they weren't talking about a comet, they were talking about us taking care of our water, you know, and making sure that we have enough water, and that it's clean. And you know, unfortunately, well, I've had different kind of lifetimes in this lifetime. And I have 3 children. 2 of them are twins. So I was a very busy housewife, mother, owner of a business for many, many years. And my spiritual work went by the wayside. I was just busy trying to put food on the table and to keep my business going. And so I don't know that I've been as helpful as maybe I would have been if I hadn't had children. But the children came and I wanted them. So, so that's what happened.
Well, you're being helpful now. I mean, we're dealing with the 6th greatest extinction of all life on this planet. And
right.
People think that it's not going to include the humans, but the Pacific Ocean's got radiation. There's a lot of stuff going on with our water. And then with the fracking, it's hitting the deep underground water, precious water. So maybe you're not too far off being what you're meant to be doing.
Well, I am visiting the Pacific Ocean on a daily basis in the wintertime because I have a condition called Raynaud's syndrome on my hands. So cold weather can give me frostbite. So I have to go the coldest months in Canada. I have to go to a warm place. And I happen to go to this one place in Mexico where I go. But I do work with water there. I bless the water, and I try to do as much as I can psychically with the water. I do prayer and I do blessings of the water. I have been thinking more and more about Dr. Emoto and just the simple
the late
stuff
Dr.
that we
Emoto?
can all do. Yes, the late.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about just the simple stuff that we can all do to water, like bless our water before we drink it. Bless our water and imagine it in beautiful crystalline shapes even before we make our coffee. There's a lot of little things that we can do at home without being too woo-woo land, right?
Well, something that a friend of mine who's just come back from the States is saying that the pH level of water that you buy in the plastic bottles is pH 9.
Oh.
And it's not good water. It's distilled, or it's sucked of any nutrients, and it's very difficult for them to get real water.
Well, that happens in Mexico for sure. All the water is basically recycled water.
It's demineralized.
And it is demineralized. It's made by Coca-Cola in the place where I live. There's a huge Coca-Cola plant close to where I live, and all the water and all the stores have their water. And they have Dasani, and they have another Coca-Cola brand that I forget what it's called, Agua Ligera. But I try to find spring water wherever I can. And I actually go to the only place that has it. One of the only places that has it is Walmart. And they have a water there. It's called Santa Martha, I think. Santa Ana water from Mexico, and it's a spring water. So I go there and I get cases of it when my friends help me drive. I don't have a car there. And I try to drink spring water here in Canada. I don't know.
In Ireland, they're killing a lot of the springs, natural springs. That's a big thing in Ireland. I mean, when I was over there, the ladies there were, keen to find springs. If you can find a spring and you can say it's alive, they can't kill it. But what's happening is that if they find any natural water, they just basically cap it over and trying to produce a number of springs. Is that happening in Canada?
You have that wonderful lady who's a dowser, and I listen to her all the time.
Maria Wheatley.
Yes, she's amazing.
She is amazing. She's one of the most amazing women you'll ever meet. She's absolutely genius.
She is a genius, yeah. I listen to all her stuff, and I think it's just wonderful. You should get her maybe to try and organize a few dowsers to get out and do that. I don't know any dowsers, but I've been thinking of joining a dowsing club here in Canada, to try and find water that's fresh. What I mostly wanted to say is that when my abduction was done with a person which may or may not be Barbara Lamb, and I've asked her in an email, but she probably gets a million emails. So who knows when she'll come up with mine. Maybe if she sees this program, she'll try and read it. But I think that if she ever came and did some abductees in Vancouver, she might have done me. And I would love to hear a tape of that, of that abduction, or even do some more work with her.
Well, I
'Cause
know
I've
she's just moved house, and she's moved to a new apartment. I mean, I interviewed her fairly recently in her
She's moved
daughter's
to where?
apartment.
To Europe?
No, in San Diego, I think.
Ah, so she's not far.
Yeah, she's not. She has left the UK. She's had to leave England. She used to be there quite a lot, but she recently moved. She is meant to be going into a new apartment. She probably's there by now. It's just the last time I interviewed her, she was in her daughter's apartment. One of her
Right.
daughters, I think.
Well, the other person who did a very extensive abduction, what do you call it?
Have you heard of Misha
A
Johnston?
regression. A regression with me was Dr. Richard Boylan.
Okay, that's a
And
name from the past. Yeah.
yes, and Dr. Boylan was doing a lot of really good work with children, with star seeds and children, and he did mine, and we went a little bit deeper into the volunteer aspect of why I'm here on Earth. I lost track of Dr. Boylan. Certain things happened that didn't make me happy. And so I kind of lost contact with Dr. Boylan. And then, he was maligned in the media, and he called himself an ambassador for for the Galactic Alliance. And I think people thought that he went crazy or whatever. I don't know. But I lost track of him. I don't know what he's doing now. And I know that some bad things happened to him and his credentials, because he's stuck his neck out so far into the UFO thing, and that, unfortunately, that happens to a lot of people. If you're in the medical field, they're going to take stuff away from you because they don't want people to be delving into these things. And I feel bad. He's a really wonderful man, and he did some really good work with me. He was able to get a lot of information out that was very, very important. In that,
Such as?
I took my son to that regression because I wanted to have a witness. He told me that he doesn't tape them, and I wanted to have a witness. So I took my son with me, and it was in that abduction that we discovered a lot of the stuff from Mars, the children coming to Earth from Mars, and the kind of vehicle that was used to transport us, and that kind of stuff I did with him. The original one that may or may not have been with Barbara Lamb, that one was about what happened on the ship. The one that happened with Dr. Boylan went a little bit deeper into the conversations that I had with the being and some of the other things that he showed on the screens, which was the coming to Earth with the other children, no adults, children feeling very, very lost. So a bunch of people, young people from Mars who were prepubescent even, and, there was no leader. And what happened? What happened to those kids? How did those kids make out? How did we integrate into the Earth?
Well, maybe this is an opportunity that, if there's an opportunity here, if anybody wanted to contact you about that, maybe there's people who've got a similar experience. How would they get hold of you, or how would you like them to get hold of you?
How about if they get in touch with me through the Basis Project? through your basis project.
Yeah, okay.
I'm a member, and they could contact me that way. I'll just check that every day.
That's on Facebook. The group?
Yeah, the Facebook. Yeah, Mimi Nelson on the basis on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one way of getting hold of you, but obviously you're going to have to check all those fake friend requests and things that you get on Facebook. You've mentioned a couple of. Sorry.
For sure. I would prefer anyone who wants to get in touch with me that at least they had to give their email address. I'm also part of the Meetup UFO group in Vancouver Meetup for UFO group. They could get in touch with me through
Well,
there.
I think that's a far better, if they use that, yeah.
Because I don't want just any old person sending me a friend request and who knows who they are.
Exactly.
I would rather
Well, okay,
that
from that point of view, exactly how do they contact you on that group? Explain what that is. Is there an email or a website or something?
If you go to meetups, there's a Vancouver UFO meetup. UFO and Paranormal, I think it's called. There's a meetup and you can join. And once you join, you can contact the members and you can direct any of your questions or just a request to be my friend on there.
I think that's a good idea.
And I'd be happy to join you because I think just friend requests just out of nowhere with no explanation and no background to the other person is really not safe for anyone. Okay. As far as I know, it's called UFO and Paranormal Meetup. Meetup is a thing that there is on the internet. It's red. The logo is red. It's called Meetup, and there's all kinds of meetups. Everything from take a walk in the park to UFO and Paranormal. So it's in Vancouver, so it would be the Vancouver meetups, and the group that I'm in is the UFO and Paranormal Meetup. And
we'll do that.
And they could get in touch with me there. If they can't get in touch with me there, then I guess they could come back to you and tell you that they didn't do it. But the one thing I wanted to clear up with you was that there was no hypnosis.
Okay, now that is important. That's important.
Yeah. There was a crystal put on my solar plexus, and then there was a hum, and I went straight into the experience that I had on the ship. Sometimes I've actually thought that the person who interviewed me was an alien, a lady. She had a wig on, and, I don't know, right? That's too weird, but there was no hypnosis involved.
Okay, I think that's very important.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Well, it's 1st of September 2017. Pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. Take care. Bye.